Last season, the Chiefs were a ton of fun to watch. However, I think it's worth mentioning their defense wasn't exactly the 85 Bears. It was actually one of the worst defenses in the league, which really shows how crazy it is that they're able to almost make it to a Super Bowl. But of course, to try to be better this season, it makes a ton of sense to try to improve on that defense. And one way they're doing that is by signing Tyrann Mathieu, who I think is a very good player and could fit into the system very well. I mean, Kansas City will have a new defensive coordinator, so we won't exactly know which defense they will be running, what kind of schemes they'll be running, but we do know that Tyrann Mathieu is a very good player and can play in multiple schemes, as he's proven already. By the way, this is his third team, so I do think this could be a good move from the Chiefs' perspective. One of the key things that makes Mathieu an effective player is the fact that he can help you out in both the running game and in the passing game. He's officially listed as a free safety, however, he plays strong safety just as well as he plays free. He plays that strong safety role very well, and he can do both sides of that role in terms of being able to stop a run and being able to stop the pass. I actually think this is going to be a very similar situation that Mathieu's going to be going into from what he was in last year with Houston, as he's going from one 3-4 to another 3-4. The 3-4 system is actually pretty simple. What you're going to see is there's going to be 5 guys on a line, which is a 1 defensive tackle, 2 defensive ends, and 2 edge rushers. And then you're going to have 2 linebackers in the middle of the screen, since this is a nickel formation out of that 3-4. This now means that there will be 1 free safety back, and then 3 defensive backs who are closer towards the middle of the screen. And since this is man coverage, each of those defensive backs have an assigned receiver that they're in charge of guarding. But look at Mathieu on his play. He's in an interesting situation. He does have a tight end that he is in charge of covering. However, at the same time, he has to be aware of a potential run. But if we take a look, the second there's a handoff, Mathieu does a very good job of breaking to the outside and making sure he contains and makes sure that there's no way that a halfback can run to the outside and try to turn the corner and get down the sideline. This is simply just understanding what your assignment is. He knows if it's a passing play, he has to make sure he covers that tight end, and if it's a running play, he has to quickly get over to that bottom half of the screen. It basically gives him 2 tasks. He has to be able to help in the run game and also help in the passing game, and that means that he can get beat. Like, if you take a look at this play, that's where he is on the screen. It's going to actually be a play action, and then they're going to send a route right there, and they're going to hope they can throw it over Mathieu. Mathieu does have to play farther in because it could be a run. If you notice at this point, Mathieu actually does do a very good job of running over to try to clog up that passing lane. However, this still does allow a throwing lane, and Blaine Gabbert is able to make a very good throw. That felt weird to say, but Blaine Gabbert is able to make a very good throw and able to hit a receiver and pick up some yards. Oftentimes, people talk about linebackers being so important as they have to impact both the passing game and the running game, but there is one other position that also has to be able to play in the passing game and running game, and that's strong safeties. And Mathieu can definitely do both. On a play like this, for example, that's where he is on the screen, and Arizona is totally expecting a run here, as Mathieu is going to very quickly run to the right side of the screen. Now, at this point, he realizes that it's not a running play, it's actually a passing play, and it's a rollout to the top half of the screen. And there is a receiver running a pretty standard out route right in that direction. But look at how good of a job Mathieu does of getting back on this play. He kind of doesn't sell out in either direction. He basically puts himself in that throwing lane in between the quarterback and receiver and intercepts the ball. It's a smart play. He puts himself in a position where if Bortles does try to run it, he can easily move up and make a tackle. However, if Bortles tries to throw it like he did there, then he can easily just jump up and make an interception. That allowed him to both stop the run and stop the pass in one play. And this next play is another great example of him doing exactly that. It's going to be a cover 3 zone, and that's where Mathieu is on the screen, as he's going to be in charge of covering the flat on the top half of the screen. And that's crucial because the Titans actually do have a curl route that could be open right in that gap in coverage right there. But now if you notice, Mathieu does a very good job of realizing where the curl route is and being in a position where he could take away that route. But also now, if you notice, Bortles does have a route to run to the top half of the screen, so he's going to roll out and try to see if he can buy more time or potentially even run for some yards. Positioning is everything, and look at the position that Mathieu is in here. He knows that he has a defender who's deep, so he's simply going to stay in that throwing lane, meaning that if Bortles tries to throw over him, there is now a safety who's behind that receiver and could easily crash in and make a play. And if Bortles tries to just throw a line drive to that receiver, then Mathieu can easily just pick it off. Bortles really has no choice at this point but to try to run for some yards, but then Mathieu is easily able to crash in and run and make a tackle. That's another way Mathieu can be really effective, is he has great acceleration. I mean, he gets up to his top speed so quickly, and that can help defenses in a huge way. It can also open up the playbook for a defensive coordinator. Like, if you take a look at this play, it's going to be a cover 2 zone, and there's 4 defensive backs and a middle linebacker who we already know what kind of positioning they will be in. However, it's the other 2 zones that are going to be a little bit interesting on this play. Oftentimes, you just have a linebacker and a strong safety go back to cover up those 2 zones. However, what Houston's going to do here is actually have 2 linebackers come back into those zones, and they're going to send the strong safety, who is Tyrann Mathieu, up to try to rush the passer. It's an interesting play because it's now taking away a safety who's in coverage, meaning that, in theory, it should make it a little bit tougher for you to have coverage in that middle part of the screen. but it's also creating confusion, and Mathieu is able to get completely unblocked, and he runs very quickly to make a sack. I mean, he gets the Bortles in no time at all, and this is all because of his acceleration. Honestly, in the running game, he's seemingly as effective as a linebacker, and in the passing game, he's seemingly as effective as a cornerback. Like on this play, it's going to be a cover 1 hole, and he has a 1-on-1 matchup that's going to be right there. If you take a look at this situation right here, Luck does see that he has a receiver who has pretty good leverage as he's about to cut to the inside and could potentially beat Mathieu. It's a bit of a dangerous throw because the Cardinals do have a linebacker who's in that area who could try to run up and make a play, but it's also a dangerous throw because he's trying to beat Mathieu, which isn't very easy to do. Mathieu breaks in and ends up intercepting the ball, and this was actually during an overtime game, so this is basically the game-winning play. He's basically a Swiss Army knife type defensive back. He can do it all, and he can really benefit a team's defense really no matter what kind of scheme you run. And this is a Chiefs defense that could definitely use some talent in the defensive back department. Although one thing that I do believe is worth mentioning is that Kansas City's current strong safety, Daniel Sorensen, I actually think is a pretty good player. I mean, he's not Tyrann Mathieu, but I definitely think he can play, and he can play that strong safety role very well. But I actually still think that adding Tyrann Mathieu and having Sorensen and Mathieu can be a huge advantage for the Chiefs. For one thing, this is a team that loves defensive backs. I mean, last year they ran a lot of nickel and a lot of dime packages. And I know people are going to say, well, they have a different defensive coordinator, so I don't know if they're going to continue to do that. And that is true, but I mean, they still have Andy Reid, and he obviously has some sort of impact on what kind of defense they run. So I do still think that there will be some carryover, just not a complete 100% carryover. Here's a good example of how having multiple defensive backs can be really beneficial. It's going to be a dime package, meaning they only have 1 linebacker in the game and 6 defensive backs in the game. What New England is going to do here is have their 3 receivers go out to make blocks and then have Cordell Patterson swing up to the top half of the screen. This now means that the next closest unblocked men will be those 2 defensive backs right there. The reason I'm bringing this up is because I think it's worth mentioning that on display, I actually thought Sorensen did a pretty solid job of rushing over and being able to make a tackle. However, no really other Chief did. If Mathieu was in a Chiefs uniform on this play, he probably could have gotten around a block, or if nothing else, at least ran over and been able to make a stop quicker. I'm going to actually be talking a lot about that Chiefs versus Patriots matchup, as I do think that's what the Chiefs are looking for this offseason. They're basically looking for how can they beat the Patriots, because that is their biggest threat in getting to a Super Bowl. Obviously, it's far from a guarantee that they will be in the AFC Championship next season. However, I do think I want to talk about them and the Patriots because those on paper seem to be the 2 best teams in the AFC. This play is another good example of a defensive back who now is in a position where he has to both be able to stop the pass and stop the run. What New England is going to do is basically have all of their offensive linemen have 1-on-1 matchups, and then they're actually going to send a receiver over to block a linebacker, which is going to make things easier for the halfback to move up and try to get past that first down marker. Meaning the Chief that's actually going to have to make a play will be that defensive back right there. If you take a look at this point, the receiver is clearly moved over to try to make a block, and there clearly is a halfback handoff. Meaning that corner should now know at this point that it is going to be a run, and he has to crash in to try to break that up. The first down marker is right there, so it's very crucial that he gets there very quickly. However, he's still very far behind the first down marker, meaning that this isn't going to work out too well. And this isn't some off-the-wall thing that the Patriots never do. I mean, the Patriots will often have a receiver move up the block, and they force defensive backs to have to try to stop the run. It's not an awful play here, however, the Patriots were able to pick up the first down, largely because of that wide receiver block. And I do think it's worth mentioning that New England wouldn't be able to do that as much against Kansas City if Kansas City had Tyrann Mathieu in the game, because Mathieu is so good at stopping the run. Clearly, having a guy who can both stop the run and a pass can be very huge. Like on a play like this, for example, it's going to be a cover 2 zone, and what New England is going to do is run play action and then have a route right there that in theory will get past those linebackers, and since there is a play action, the linebackers will have to move further in and be able to make a throw over the top of the linebackers and pick up a decent gain. However, take a look at that linebacker right there. This is a pretty interesting situation. He is going to be ready for a potential run right off the bat, but after he realizes there isn't a run, he gets back and is able to tip the ball up, and actually Daniel Sorensen ends up being the guy who intercepts it. Against all teams, but especially against New England, being able to be in both those situations where you can stop the run and also get back to stop a pass can be absolutely crucial. And while of course Mathieu isn't going to be lined up as an edge rusher anytime soon, I do think it's worth mentioning that that can be very effective. And again, while I like Sorensen, I'm not saying that he's an elite player by any means. Like on a play like this, for example, it's actually pretty basic from the Patriots' perspective. They're simply just going to have a bunch of 1-on-1 matchups and send their halfback straight up the middle. So one of the key blocks on this play will be their left guard taking on Sorensen. Sorensen really can't afford to lose this matchup. He has to find a way to get around his block and get to the halfback. However, he gets blocked out of the way very easily, and this is not going to be very bad news for the Chiefs, as the Patriots are able to pick up a very big run. I can't say for certain that Tyrann Mathieu wouldn't have gotten blocked as well on this play, but I think it's worth mentioning that if you have Tyrann Mathieu run this play 100 times and you have Daniel Sorensen run this play 100 times, Mathieu is going to be successful on this play more often than Sorensen is. And one more play explaining how having someone who can both stop the run and pass could be so crucial for the Chiefs is a play like this. It's a goal line scenario, but obviously they do have to have some defensive backs in the game in case there is a passing play. Really, the key on this play is going to be that defensive back right there. The Patriots have a very simple blocking scheme. It's going to be one-on-one blocks all across the board, with the one exception being their center has a zone blocking scheme right in the middle of that screen. What New England's going to try to do here is create a gap in between their left tackle and left guard. Now, there will be a Chiefs linebacker who's able to run in through that gap, but since the Patriots have a fullback, they can block him out of the way, meaning the next closest guy is going to be that defensive back I just showed you. If this is a great player like Tyrann Mathieu, for example, I think there's a very good chance that he moves up a couple of steps once he sees this play is developing and is able to run over and make a tackle and avoid a touchdown on this play. However, Steven Nelson takes way too long to realize that, and he makes contact when the ball was in the end zone for a touchdown. This isn't the one play that cost them the game. I mean, at this point, the chances were very slim that the Chiefs were going to win anyways. But I think it's just one example of many how they could have really used a defensive back like Tyrann Mathieu to beat the Patriots. Really, Mathieu is the perfect way to beat the Patriots. I mean, granted, he's never beaten the Patriots before. However, I do think it's just worth mentioning that he is the type of player who can help you beat the Patriots. Of course, you're going to have a whole team effort to win, but I do think he can be a huge advantage to them in beating the Patriots potentially next season, but also just to them being successful next season. He's a really talented player, and I think it's going to be a great addition for the Chiefs.